So we continue with the Angular interview questions and answers. So dependency injection in Angular. This is an important question. What is dependency injection in Angular? Dependency injection is actually a design pattern which is used in Angular to manage the creation and sharing of the application components and services. What does that mean is that we provide actually the object of the class as into the constructor of the class that is going to use it. Instead of creating an object, we're using this new keyword or whatever way. So this helps us in providing us this capability that there is a loose coupling between the components and services, because we are declaring the dependency, in fact, and we are not creating the dependency directly in the class. We are just declaring the dependency in the constructor of the class that is or service that is going to use this service. Next, data binding types in Angular. Okay, there are actually 4 types of data binding in Angular. One is interpolation. Interpolation, you use these brackets, and inside the brackets you have your variable. And property binding is you have these big brackets. In event binding, you have smaller brackets, and in two-way binding, you use this ng mod ng model. So this two-way binding is ng model keyword is used, and you have these big brackets and small parentheses. So you interpolation, property binding, event binding, and two-way binding. So these are the 4 types of data binding in Angular. We can describe them in detail later in another question. So next, we have again dependency injection. Dependency injection, to explain it more, dependency injection is actually a fundamental concept. It's a design pattern that promotes the principle of the inversion of control. So it allows you to provide a dependency such as services to the components and services rather than having to create their dependency directly. So you don't create an object inside the class, but you provide their dependency through the constructor of the component and the services that are going to use this service. Like you have the constructor of the component or services, and if it's going to use another service, you simply declare this in the constructor, the object. And this makes our code more modular, testable. Of course, it's easy to test also because you can create test services or test classes, and you can inject your components or services in them, and kind of create those test cases. So there's a coupling between the test cases and the real code. And we are going to describe now dependency injection using some example. Let's say we have a service called the user service. So you see we have a user service. We have this injectable keyword here for dependency injection. So user service is the class and get user functions, which is going to return this list of users. Now we want to use this user service in another component or service. Let's say we want to use this user service in this user list component. So user list component is a component. We use this component directive. So we have selector, template, and then we have this class name, user list component. And here in the constructor, we are injecting this user service in the constructor, and you can simply use this .user service .get users to get the user list in this component. So that's how we are going to use this service is injected in this component. We are also we can also use services into another services. For example, let's say we want to log here, use a logger here. So we create a logger service. This logger service is simply printing a message that is passed to this log function of this log service class. It's an injectable class. So now we want to inject this logger service into our user service. So that's how we are going to do this. So the logger service is going to be provided here inside the constructor of the user service. and then it's declared here, and then you use this logger service object dot log and simply add fetching users string to it, and it will print fetching users when this get users will be called here. So get user will be called here because user service is injected into the user list component, and when get user will be called, this user service, which is using the logger service, is going to print this. As you see, logger service log is defined here in the logger service class. Yeah, so that's what that's how dependency injection is done in Angular. This is the concept of dependency injection in Angular. So now, next concept, what is lazy loading? Lazy loading is also a very important concept in Angular. Actually, lazy loading is very important when you have very big applications. Lazy loading is actually a technique that is used in Angular where the user, you or the developer is going to load the parts of the application only when they are needed. You're not going to initialize everything even if it's not needed. You're going to load those parts of the code or initialize them and use them only when they are needed in the code. This reduces the initial load time, and it is achieved by creating separate feature modules and configuring the router to load them on demand. So you create separate feature modules and then you use the router to load them on demand. So this really improves the initial loading performance, and lazy loading is used, as I said, in large applications with many routes. So let's see by example how lazy loading is done. Let's see, we have here a module uh, and which is called a product module. We define the routes of this product module, which is product list component and product detail component. And here there are declarations and imports inside the module. And so we are going to lazy load this module, uh, and let's see how we are going to do it. We go to uh, our main app routing module, and in the route we add this load children keyword. Using this children keyword, we will provide the route to our lazy loaded modules. Actually, it's not so visible here, so I can show you here also. So these are my lazy loaded modules. Like, this is the product module, and this is the home module. This one is the home module. And so we are going to have this path after this, this product module here and the home module here. So we provide this lazy loading the module that we have to lazy load in this route using this load children keyword, and in our app routing module, in the route of the app routing module. And then what we do next, we make sure that our main app module is using this app routing module, with the app routing module has this module, app products module, as lazy loaded in its route. So we make sure that our main app module is using this app routing module, and then the next step and the last step is that our app component.html file, it's going to include this lazy router outlet, sorry, where inside this lazy loaded content will be displayed. So inside this template we are going to display our lazy loaded content. For example, for example, the home module and this product module. We are going to display it inside this router outlet keyword. So these are the steps that you use to lazy load different modules in our or services in our uh, Angular app. So the interviewer can also ask you to describe in detail these data binding types in Angular, which are interpolation, property binding, event binding, or two-way binding, or and to write them how you know. So let's go through that. So first of all is interpolation. Interpolation is written like this. You have your variable like this inside these double brackets on the HTML page of your application. And this is a one-way data binding technique. In interpolation, you go from the model to the view. Like for example, from your component, any of the properties inside your components or defined in your components is going to be displayed on the view on the HTML page. Uh, and this is the only this way from model to view. Uh, this is called interpolation. The next is property binding. Property binding is done like this. For example, you have an image, you will have a keyword, and then you provide the URL or path to the image. So using property binding, you go from the web to the or from the view to the model. So your property from so this is also one way, but from the view to the model. Image URL is the property in the component, and this is like inside the model or inside the component, and this is set to the source property of the image from the HTML or the view page. Okay, the next is event binding. So event binding is a data binding in which which is used to respond to the user actions. For example, user clicks on a button and something in our component inside the code, something or inside our models or services components, especially you can say mainly some action is triggered or some function is called. Something is handled. For example, in this case, this is the function that is defined inside our component, and this function will be called when this button on the UI will be, or on the view will be clicked by the user. And the next is the last two-way binding. This is a two-way binding. It's only two-way binding, and it is using the ng model directive. Uh, So in this case, the data is normally flowing in both directions, from the web, from the view to the model, and from the model to the view. For example, a username property is a property defined in the component, but when the user inputs something from the web, some username, it is this value goes to the component, and also it can go in the other way. Like if the value is any value this property gets inside the component is also displayed on the view. So this is a two-way kind of a data binding thing. It binds both properties in the components and also events from the view, and it's simultaneous. This is happening both ways simultaneously. What are the lifecycle hooks in Angular? Yeah, so Angular has several lifecycle hooks which are allowing the developer to react to the changes in it depending on what's the state of the component right now. For example, ng on init, ng on changes, ng after view init, and ng on destroy. So these are the four common hooks that are used in Angular, and these would provide us the opportunity to perform certain tasks depending on what we want to do at a specific stage of a component's life cycle. For example, this ng on init is called hook is called hook or function, you can say, is called when, for example, the component is initialized but the child view of the components is not yet initialized. And ng after view init is called this hook is called when the component is also initialized and also its child view is also already initialized. And ng on destroy hook is called just before the component is going to be destroyed and it's going to be removed from the DOM. So this hook is normally used, for example, when we want to unsubscribe some observables or something, or we want to close some connections, or you know any kind of connection. Let's say some API connections or some database connections, whatever, or we want to kind of release the resources. That's where this ngo destroy is called. It happens just before we do these kind of tasks, as you know, that just before we are destroying the component. So we use this ngo destroy at that time. And the last one, ng on changes, is called whenever any one or more properties inside the component change, and we want to, do some action based on this change in the property of this component. Then this ng on changes hook is used. Yeah, so this is some explanation of the Angular lifecycle hooks, which is a very important question in an Angular interview.